Today we're going to talk about, try to find some different aspects of the news. 2020 has been a bad year for probably most people. But if you're a Cleveland Browns fan or a Buffalo Bills fan, what's up is down and what's right is wrong. Apparently, both of our teams, John, to introduce you, you're a lifelong Buffalo Bills fan for some reason. Both of our teams are making it to the playoffs this year, right?
This is the truth. The Bills clinched their division last week, won their division for the first time since 1995. The Browns are headed back to the playoffs. They haven't quite clinched it yet, but they would have to they'd have to lose both of their remaining games, including one against the worst team in the league, and have the Raiders win both of theirs. The Browns are pretty safe bet to be in the playoffs at this point.
Now, as a Browns fan, obviously that is some margin for error, and we could have some disappointing results. But for the purposes of this conversation, this is weird, right? I mean, what do you think is going on this year that's causing these teams that, in the case of the Cleveland Browns, have not had a winning season since the new team came into existence?
I think it's actually their second or third winning season. It'll be their second trip to the playoffs. They currently have the longest playoff drought in the league. Buffalo broke their 17-year playoff drought 4 years ago. We were so excited that our fans donated over $500,000 to the foundation of a quarterback of the Cincinnati Bengals who helped beat a team we needed to lose to get into the playoffs that year. Things are actually a little bit different than both years. The Cleveland Browns have another new head coach this year. The Bills have stuck with the same head coach for 4 years, and it seems to be making a difference. I think the team's circumstances are actually fairly different, even though they'll both be in the playoffs for the first time this year since 1989.
So you're trying to go with the sort of sports analysis that there was preparations that took place and that they've worked hard and that they've earned this year, and that if it was 2021, they might still be good teams, and that what happened last year doesn't matter.
I would say that's true about the Bills and not the Browns. I'm trying to make the argument that the Bills and Browns, believe it or not, are in different circumstances, even though they're both making it to the playoffs this year. This will be the third time in the last 4 years that the Bills have made the playoffs. And I think it'll be the first time that they actually win a playoff game since 1995.
Well, I don't this team, the present Cleveland Browns, the new addition, they have made it to the playoffs. I thought I did some research on this. Maybe they've had a winning season, but I don't think so. You've done your research?
I've done my research. They made the playoffs in 2002.
The first year that they are very early on in their existence, right?
See, they came back to Cleveland in 1999.
So this is kind of my point. I was the most diehard Cleveland Browns fan until Art Modell took the team to Baltimore, and they became the Baltimore Ravens and then did really well, and that was our team. Those are our people. Those are our records.
Won the Super Bowl, I think, their first or second year in Baltimore. They won the Super Bowl, yeah.
So we were on the way to doing that, and people who know Bill Belichick, he actually was a Cleveland Browns before, Tom Brady and all of that happened at the Patriots. The Patriots were a joke. And so when your team moves away when you're 15 after, they were your team, it's kind of hard. I know a lot of Cleveland fans out there have been able to come back to this team. But when they've lost, what was it, 2 years ago that they had the worst record in the history of ever? Like, they've lost the most number of games in a row.
They're one of two teams ever to go 0-16 for the season.
When that happens, I did get back in. I started to watch them, and I was like, this is getting interesting again, because when they're not, you don't want a 6-8 season or something like that. You want them to win at losing. And so I started to watch, and then it seems like Baker Mayfield is very fun to watch. The team is crazy. The team is absolutely crazy. And so I started to think, well, maybe this is a team worthy of my attention again. And then this year's happening, and we'll see. But do you think, based on your analysis, since you actually watch the sport, you're not just doing it for 5 minutes a season, do you think that this is here to stay?
I think that there are some positive signs for both teams. I think that, like you mentioned, Baker Mayfield is the new quarterback for the Browns. He's been their starter for 3 years in a row, which might be the longest anybody has started consistently for the Browns since Bernie Kosar back in the 80s. I also, I don't know if you know, but in the same draft in 2018, the Bills picked a new quarterback, Josh Allen. Both guys were kind of jokes last year. Both have taken really major steps forward by the wonky data, new school analysis. They're both top 5 quarterbacks in the NFL this year. And I think another thing they have in common, again, really boring if you're not a really deep sports fan, but like I said, we've had a coach, we've had things settled. One of those reasons is our very old owner died a few years ago. We got new ownership that put their attention into the team. The ownership of the Cleveland Browns also changed hands about 4 or 5 years ago. The ownership of the Cleveland Browns also owns the Flying J gas stations. And they just recently cleared a giant lawsuit off of their plate. It may give them more attention to give them the time to give more attention to the team, pay more attention, and start to breed a consistency that has not existed in the football stadiums in either Cleveland or Buffalo for a very long time.
So again, you're starting to give us some facts and evidence that this might not be an anomaly, or that at least if it is, that there was some purposeful attention, and that if you work hard at something that you might actually achieve success. Now, that's the American way, whatever you want to call it. I have another question for you. You live in Allentown, Pennsylvania. Why are you a Buffalo Bills fan? Have you even ever been to a game?
This is a really good question. I was hoping you were asked. I have been to 3 or 4 Bills games, but none of them in Buffalo. I have been to Buffalo once in my life. I went there to check out the stadium, buy things at their gift shop, and when I happened to use the bathroom in their field house, I was there on the last day of a football camp run by my favorite football player of all time, Hall of Fame quarterback Jim Kelly. Got to hear him make a speech, very nice. But the reason I'm a Buffalo Bills fan is I live in, as you can see, Allentown, Pennsylvania. I grew up here halfway between the New York and the Philadelphia markets. And my brother was an Eagles fan. My dad was a Giants fan. Nobody in their right mind is a Jets fan. And for some reason, we got Buffalo networks on our cable. They were a good team. I started watching them, started rooting for them. My dad brought me back this magnet, blending my childhood love of cartoon food with a new love of my favorite corporate logo of all time. And I've stuck with them ever since. You know, if you made it through 4 Super Bowl losses with the team in a row, made it through what was, until the Cleveland Browns set the new record this year, the longest playoff drought in NFL history. It's nice to have stuck with them and finally see a little success from the team.
Do you want them to win now that it's possible?
Yeah, really bad. Really bad. And I think that the Chiefs won the Super Bowl last year, and I think they are by most measures the favorite to win the Super Bowl against this year. A tough team for us to get by in the AFC. But again, most of the power rankings have the Bills as the second or third best team in the league right now. I think we have a legitimate chance of, like I said, I think we will win a playoff game for the first time this year in 25 years. And I wouldn't put it out of the question that the Bills end up in the Super Bowl. And I'm not getting my hopes up because, like I just said, I've been a Bills fan for 30 years. I don't think it's out of the question that we can win one in the next few years.
Do you think that there's some sort of a COVID-related planning that's taking place there? Some teams have had a difficult time fielding a team this year. Do you think that the Bills have taken it more seriously or have had more luck with people not?
This is a really interesting question too. They have had a couple of outbreaks. They had an outbreak in their tight end room. They actually have one young tight end who's out for the season who has myocarditis, which is this heart-hardening complication that so many doctors were worried about with athletes coming back and recovering from COVID. We had a game rescheduled. One of our opponents, the Tennessee Titans, had an outbreak that caused a Sunday game of ours to be the first Tuesday game in the NFL in 70 years. Most people expected us to beat the Titans that game because they were shorthanded, but they ended up crushing us in our worst loss of the season. One other measure that I can bring up, a few weeks ago, the Broncos had to play a game with no quarterbacks because they didn't do the proper social distancing, mask wearing, and contact tracing. So when one quarterback tested positive for COVID, their whole quarterback room had to sit out. They started a rookie wide receiver at quarterback. It was a mess. The Bills are the only team in the league that since the first week and every week without exception, we're keeping our third string quarterback completely isolated from the team in case there is something that happens in our first two quarterbacks route. We do have somebody who knows how to throw the ball that should be kept separate from them at least.
You know, I haven't read up on this at all, and I have no idea what the Browns are doing. But if there's anything that could happen at the mistake on the lake, I think that we'll have to see what happens in the next couple of weeks. I know that you just said even this weekend that they're playing the Jets, but that doesn't mean anything, obviously, until it's all done. But you know, I think that this is something. You know, you talk to Cubs fans that have had some wins recently, and then before that, the Boston Red Sox had a really long drought. Obviously, the Indians changing their name may, in my opinion, also an Indians fan from the past, may bode well for their future. You'd think that there's some players that would play harder against that mascot, Chief Wahoo. Maybe this is the difference between some players signing with the Indians or not, because the name is so offensive. Who knows? Maybe not. Maybe that the curse is that they've been the longest losing team in baseball and possibly in professional sports since they haven't had a World Series victory since 1948. I think my dad was not even 1 year old at that time. He didn't even watch baseball. So I know you said that winning was important, but there's got to be something else when you're stuck in one of these seasons over and over again where you're not getting anywhere. And in fact, this year you already admitted that it's very unlikely that they're getting past the Kansas City Chiefs this year, even if they go even further. So why are you doing this? What's it about?
All right, I'll tell you what it's about. I'll mention one other thing I forgot to mention and why I'm a Bills fan. When I was 10 years old, I wrote them a letter, and they just wrote me back and sent me a bag of swag, and it was something that they didn't have to do, and I still appreciate. And I don't know. I love the Bills in a way that like I don't love other inanimate things, I guess. It's interesting that you bring up the baseball thing because in baseball I'm a Phillies fan, and I think there's a really interesting parallel here to what we're talking about. The Bills doing well in 2020 because the Phillies, first sports team in the history of any sport professionally to lose 10,000 games. It took them 97 years to win their first World Series. They won one in 1980 when I was less than 1 year old. And they won again in 2008. And it's interesting to me because 2008 was a really bad year for a lot of people with the financial issues. And it was the end of another controversial, polarizing presidency that year as well. And I remember everybody like, oh, I can't wait. 2008 is gone. Can't wait to get rid of this year. And I thought it was great because I personally had a bad 2007 and the Phillies won the World Series in 2008. And it gave me an outlook and a type of hope that I really never had in life before. And when the Phillies won the World Series and I saw it with my own eyes, I believed in a set of possibilities in life that I didn't believe in before. And if the Bills can win the Super Bowl this year or ever, it's gonna open up my heart in the same way. And in the meantime, if you don't expect much from them, you're not really going to be disappointed.
Do you
no downside
at a certain point in the season, or does it not matter?
No,
like when they have no chance of making it.
I watch. I've been using my parents' Direct TV Sunday ticket to watch every single Bills game just about for the past at least 10 years. They stopped having the Sunday ticket this year. It's been great because the Bills are not good enough to get some primetime games that I'm still able to watch. But yeah, I watch the games, and I'm the kind of fan that even if we're losing the game, I want to see how the rookie right guard is developing. Like, is he doing better at his run blocking? What's it going to mean for next season? The team building aspect, when I play the video games, I'd rather be the general manager than the coach of the team. And the team building aspects and the hope for next year is something that never extinguishes, even when you get used to not having any hope for this year. I think that's something that Browns fans can relate to as well.
I mean, I used to be there, but I think that you can't underestimate the damage that it causes. I think that I was in my sophomore year. No, I was in my freshman year of high school when they left. I remember we took a trip to like Washington, D.C. during the government shutdown, and we flew into Baltimore from Cleveland by some chance. My story is I grew up between the Lions, which were closer, and then the Browns, but I lived in Ohio and Toledo, Ohio, and it just made more sense to be a Browns fan, even though you had Barry Sanders. The Browns were somehow connected better to like Ohio State and everything that was going on there, in my opinion. And it just made more sense. And the stadium was, comparing it to the Pontiac Silverdome, I got my dad to take me there once, and it was the coldest thing I've ever experienced. And even to this date, I mean, hot chocolate was like frozen, and it was on the lake there. And you got to be thinking to yourself, who would do this? You know, who would build this stadium in such a way where it seemed like the wind was designed to come into it? But it was great. It was old. It was a shitty place. It's gone. But, you know, I love that place. People didn't win there unless they were the other team. But, you know, there also, I guess I wanted to ask you this maybe about your character and who supports different teams. Because there's obviously people who support the Yankees, and there's people who like the Cowboys, or they like the Patriots in this dominant era for them that's probably come to a close. There's people like that. You found a team in one of the smallest markets. You could have picked even the Steelers. You could have picked teams that were closer to where you live. Do you like picking these teams in these godforsaken places where some people have to pick them because that's where they live?
I kind of do like rooting for the underdog in a game that I have no rooting interests. I like to root for the underdog. But like I said, part of it was like childhood rivalries and wanting to have different favorite teams than my brother and my dad. The Bills are the teams I've stuck with the longest. I became a Phillies and Sixers fan after I moved out of Pennsylvania, and really it meant more to me to wear a Phillies shirt when I was living in Arizona than around here where everybody's already got them on. And Buffalo, I've just stuck with them. The Eagles won the Super Bowl a couple of years. I wanted to be real happy. I was way happier that they beat the Patriots, who we don't like, obviously. There's something about it's a cliche with Buffalo, right? The blue collars and the rust belts. But there's something about the people that like stick with it. You can find all kinds of documentaries about the Bills Mafia. It's what the fan base calls ourselves. Jumping through tables at tailgates. There's this famous tailgater named Pinto Ron that I was fortunate enough to meet last year at a game in Miami. He gets doused with ketchup and mustard every year. It's just a team that no matter how bad things get, the fans stay supportive in a way that like Philadelphia fans have kind of the opposite reputation.
Yeah, I think that there's something to that. I mean, I haven't lived in Cleveland or Ohio for probably, I guess it's 20 years now. When I do meet Browns fans in the wild, it's nice to find them. Although you could criticize me as being fair weather. I just feel broken and damaged from this entire experience. I basically stopped watching sports, and I was definitely watching every Sunday. And for me, the reason I like them is they did have a chance when I was in, and so I'll admit that. And the Indians also in the 90s, they had a chance. They almost went all the way a few times. It was very close. And so I think that kind of messed with my psychology, that you had this once in a lifetime experience in a place that frankly hadn't won anything in 100 years in a lot of ways. Going back to Standard Oil and that sort of thing. That you could see something like that. I can relate. I was never as excited about the Cavaliers for some reason, and I also, and people are going to get upset, and whatever, they can get upset. But when it's just LeBron and then the others, it doesn't feel the same as when you have, Webster Slaughter, Bernie Kosar,
Sure.
all these different players that are like coming together. Some of which went to Michigan or Ohio State that you've watched develop over time. And it felt like they were part of the community and that they were winning together. And it was kind of like everybody always expected that you weren't supposed to. So that felt different to me. This team, I think, is now finally, maybe it's the same thing where they're winning again and I'm interested again.
You're allowed to be a bandwagon fan or a fair weather fan, and some people might criticize you, but you're allowed to root for whoever you want whenever you want. I think a lot. Listen, when I started rooting for the Bills, they were good too. One of the reasons that I liked the Bills and I liked the Browns back in the '80s too, they both had quarterbacks that came out of the University of Miami, which was a really good school. They had the bright orange colors. They were like a fun, cocky school to watch play. So it's not a surprise that I liked guys coming out of that university and still do to this day. I think that what you talk about, like rooting for the fans and the community, when the Bills made the playoffs for the first time in 17 years, this was 3 years ago. The it's Buffalo in December, right? And you got thousands of people deep at the airport greeting the fans when they come home. I don't quite as much approve of it when they did it after they won the division in the middle of COVID times. Maybe we should celebrate from home, but this is a team that's out for its fan. And like I said, out for its arch rivals too. There's been a sportscaster on ESPN this year that Bills fans have perceived as being critical of the quarterback, and instead of getting on Twitter and trolling him, they've gotten on Twitter and they've donated $10,000 to his charitable foundation. And it's just the kind of to have a team as bad as the Bills ever got. I don't think you ever saw us wearing bags over our heads in that stadium the way that they did in Cleveland. It's a fan base that stays happy, that rallies around that team, that appreciates them for what they are. In a town that, you're right, it's the second smallest market in the NFL behind Green Bay, and man, they just love their team, and I'm with them.
Yeah, but you didn't have the drive, okay, twice as far as I can count, where you were gonna win and you were gonna make it to the Super Bowl, and then you had John Elway and his fucking smirk on his face going 99 yards down the field. You didn't have anything like that. You had 4 Super Bowl appearances where somehow you were the best team in the AFC.
Right, I had Scott Norwood wide right. Scott Norwood wide right. They made it was so iconic that like the Ray Finkel character in Ace Ventura is basically Scott Norwood. You know who Scott? You don't follow sports. You know who Scott Norwood is.
I don't know who he is, but did he have the Flutie Flakes too? Or I don't know.
Oh.
I thought those were fake. But yeah.
Listen. They have a new cereal for the new quarterback this year too. One of the most well-loved versions of the national anthem is when Whitney Houston sang it at the Super Bowl one year, and everybody loves it. And I hate it because it was Super Bowl 25 when the Giants beat the Bills by 1 point. I hate it.
It was like during Desert Storm, so it had extra meaning. And it
was.
It's the
it was. But to me, it can be all of those things, and I believe them all, but all it does for me is bring back bad memories of a missed field goal.
Yeah, I hear that. I have to admit, I've never liked the Bills. They're not like my mortal enemy, the Pittsburgh Steelers or anything, but and I hate the Patriots. I mean, like, who doesn't hate the Patriots? My gosh.
Well, it's one of the reasons. It's one of the reasons that people are really jumping on the Bills bandwagon this year is because we've been so bad for so long. We never beat anybody. I'm still mad at the Cowboys for 2 Super Bowls 27 years ago, but the Bills never beat anybody to make you mad. So it's easy if you're a casual fan or if your team is having a down year and you're picking somebody to root for in the playoffs, it's easy to root for the Bills this year, I think.
Yeah, I mean, we'll have to see. I guess one other larger question about this is, do you think that the reason that, I guess Green Bay has had some more success being a small town and, all of the stuff that goes with that, do you think that these communities, because they're smaller, they're at a disadvantage, even though the NFL is set up a little bit more differently than baseball, right? Like, it's a little bit more competitive. It's not just you bring the most money and you have the most television dollars and you win. But do you think there's a relationship between these smaller communities and their failure?
I think that they're There is and then there's not, because you look at a place in Green Bay and the nickname there is Titletown, and people want to go play there because of the history, because of the legacy, and because even though they haven't really had a lot of weapons around them, it's been 30 years and they've only had two quarterbacks, and they had two Hall of Famers and Brett Favre followed up by Aaron Rodgers. So you know what? You get a good quarterback and all of a sudden there's free agents that don't want to go to a town that might be interested in going to a place that's cold if they think they have a chance at winning. But I think this works in the other way, where I don't believe that like the New York Giants, who play in New Jersey, are connected to their fan base that the same way that the Buffalo Bills are. I don't think that like in Miami, people are dying to go to a Bills game when there's so many other things going on. But the Bills is the lifeblood of that town in a time of year when the weather is not great. People are mostly outside. They're coming out to that stadium in 20 degrees with no shirts on, and they're having the times of their lives.
So it does matter if they win, but it also doesn't matter if they win.
Yeah, in a place like Buffalo, I think they've found a way. And again, I'm not from Buffalo at all, but this is a team that I've rooted for 35 years. We found a way to take pride in our team even when they don't win. And if we're going to get a couple of wins a year, we'll be happy about those wins. If we can beat the Patriots because Tom Brady is suspended for deflating the footballs, you know what? We'll take it in the meantime.
Do you think that after COVID on your
Something about Buffalo fans, we understand that sports are supposed to be fun.
That's a good point. Do you think that after COVID on your list is actually going to see a game there? Have you had any interest in doing that? You could do that. You could get up early, drive from your house where you're at right now, and be home in the same day. You don't even have to stay in a hotel.
Oh, well, I'll take the kids. I'll stay in a hotel. We'll do Niagara Falls, all that stuff. The plan this year, I was going to take them up for training camp, which is done in like a not quite a big, loud stadium. My daughters are only 5 and 7 years old. You can get a little bit closer to the players and see a scrimmage or something like that. I was planning on doing that with the family this year. I went down and saw a game in Miami last year. The weather is better in November. But yeah, as soon as it's allowed again, and as soon as I think that it's reasonably safe, I intend to not just go by myself, but take my family up to Buffalo for a game.
Do your kids like the Bills?
They're not like real sports fan, but they like the Bills. I bought my daughter a Tyrod Taylor jersey a couple years ago, and she went nuts. Absolutely loved it. My wife has learned in 10 years of knowing me that if she doesn't want to engage in football, that's okay. But if I talk about it, she just responds, "Go Bills." I had a real funny thing a couple of years ago where one of my kids went to preschool with a boy whose dad flew jets, and they came in and started talking about jets, and then my daughter saw the Jets on TV and she started liking the Jets for a little bit. I was really, really concerned, but that's faded away. They've had Bills clothes and toys since they were young. I wanted to make sure that I get that properly into their subconscious before they can decide they like another team more.
Well, I guess we've covered it. We've run over a little bit, considering that we had a little bit of a tough start. But who's playing this weekend? What day? For those at home,
the Browns take on the Jets on Sunday. If the Browns win that game, they will clinch their first playoff berth in 18 years. The Bills play Monday night in New England. We beat New England for the first time of our head coach's tenure early in the season, and have a chance to sweep them I can't even think about how long it's been since we swept the Patriots in a season.
I mean, they were a joke in the 90s, so that's probably they were the worst team for a very long time. People don't remember that.
Yeah, all this kind of stuff goes in cycles. You want to the funniest thing in all of this to me is that
I don't think I heard that, so I'm not sure if anybody else did.
Go ahead. My audio is coming through a little slow, but go ahead.
Yeah, I don't know if we heard that last one. I guess in conclusion, if either of these teams actually make it to the Super Bowl by some freak chance, I think we just lost John Flashnick, maybe because we said it out loud. We'll come back and talk to everybody here. On behalf of John, who's a historian but also a Buffalo Bills fan, here he's back. I was going to wrap it up. Is there anything else you want to add?
No, I'm good.
Well, we'll come back if they end up winning, and we'll talk about what that feels like. But I want to thank you for sharing your passion and your history and your better knowledge of football than I have right now on this Boxing Day, the day after Christmas. Obviously, we hope for the best, but we're realistic about this and who's going to win this year. But it's definitely, I think the point of this is that some good things that are unusual can also happen this year in 2020. But I think I can speak for myself, but maybe the rest of the world, I'm ready for this year to be finished.
Yeah, until then, go Bills.
I'm Dan Beckman, reporting from a trailer for Haps. We have some really cool interviews coming up next week. I'm not going to tell you what they are until I have them closed, but we'll be coming to you with more on Haps. Thanks.